Shalom and welcome to the Israel Policy Pod. I'm Neri Zilber, a journalist based in Tel Aviv and a policy advisor to Israel Policy Forum. Assaf Orion is back with us this week to make sense of the very much ongoing and very deadly still Lebanon front, and also to discuss the latest with regard to Iran, naturally. Assaf is, of course, a retired Israeli brigadier general who previously headed the IDF Strategic Planning Division, and he's now an international fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, as well as a senior research fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv. This was a terrific conversation, as always, with Assaf, where he broke down for us what exactly has been happening on Israel's northern border against Hezbollah over the past 2 months since the start of the Iran war, why it's now still the hottest and most active military conflict in the entire Middle East, it's true, and what Israel is actually trying to achieve in Lebanon. There are a few better than Assaf on this topic, believe me, so let's get into it. Hi, Assaf. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Neri. Thank you for inviting.
It's really our pleasure to have you back on, Assaf. Especially this week, I wanted to talk about Lebanon, and we'll get to Lebanon in just a minute, trust me. But we have to start, I think, with the latest on the Iran front. And just for awareness for our listeners and viewers, we're recording this Wednesday night Tel Aviv time, Wednesday afternoon DC time, where you are, Assaf, at the Washington Institute. Fair to say it's already been a tumultuous week in the Gulf and on the Iran front. Also a very tumultuous day on Wednesday today. So there's always a good chance our listeners and viewers will be smarter than we are by the time this episode goes up. But I really wanted to get a sense from you, where do you think things are headed, given the fact that we started the week with President Trump declaring Project Freedom, which was his bid using the U.S. Navy and U.S. military to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to commercial shipping, to break the Iranian blockade. Iran started firing a bit at the UAE and Oman, but by, late Tuesday night, early Wednesday night, Middle East time, Trump said he was pausing Project Freedom, and in order to let ongoing talks with Iran progress, and in his words, to see whether or not an agreement can be finalized and signed. And then over the course of today, there were various reports that there was discussions over a one-page document to get the U.S. and Iran literally on the same page and potentially end the war officially. So a lot happened today. A lot has happened in just the past few days. First question to you, Assaf. What the hell do you think is going on here on the Iran front?
Well, from the get-go, I think we could describe two parallel campaigns waged by the Allies from one hand and by Iran from the other hand. The Allied campaign was mostly a massive intelligence-driven precision strike, which Iran couldn't block, couldn't foil, couldn't counter in any effective way, just suffer what it must. But in asymmetric strategy, you don't need to excel in the same competition that your rival imposes on you. Mm-hmm. So Iran does what it does best, which is hostage taking. Hostage taking both of the regional neighbors, Gulf countries, and so on, but also of the world economy through the grip on the Strait of Hormuz. So basically, you could say that the alliance, or the U.S. and Israel, could dull a bit, the sharp edge of this campaign, but couldn't totally counter it. And the place where those two campaigns, which run in parallel, converge is the negotiation table, discussing the conditions of ceasefire, of the end of the war, of Hormuz, of the nuclear issue. Israel has some other issues that it wants to see resolved. But that's the politics of this. That's the exchange or the change office between military inputs and political gains or political achievements. So we are now at the moment of another moment of test of whether this campaign or that campaign could cause either side to say, okay, enough is enough. Now, beside that, I think we have verbal discussions of the end of the war, which to me sound more like trying to feed the Washington, maybe even the Hill questions of the war authorities within the 60 days limit.
Mm-hmm.
And also discussions of the ceasefire and whether the attacks on the UAE are breaking the ceasefire, violating it, totally violating it, only partially violating it. And when people argue, and the same is in Lebanon these days, whether a ceasefire is on and off, and it's difficult to discern because fire is ongoing, it shows you the margins of maneuver of the political leadership. In 2019, when Iran attacked the Abqaiq installations in Saudi Arabia, President Trump decided to say it's not America's problem, but Saudi, and we're not really sure who did it, and all these. So the administration choosing to say the attack on the UAE is not a major rupture in the ceasefire shows you the priorities right now. But that's not the end of the game. When you're standing on the sword's edge, you can fall out either way, both to escalation or to termination.
Right. And even Donald Trump, while saying that there was a new proposal to potentially end the war on the table and that there was progress, he also said that if Iran didn't accept, he would renew the bombing at a very, intensive level. So he's still threatening, but at the same time, he stopped this Project Freedom, right? This naval campaign after a day or two. Did that surprise you that he didn't continue it even while he was still negotiating with the Iranians?
I would say surprised, but not astonished me.
You weren't bowled over.
Yes, it's like a path with many switchbacks that you go this way, you go that way, seeking for the right way. Basically, I think both sides are trying to shape the other side's BATNA, the best alternative to no agreement. Iran would like to see it, we will insist, America would accept our conditions, and then they will go home and we will continue with our business. This is why America has to show that the alternative to an agreement is a major escalation and additional loss. So the question is, how convinced are the Iranians that they can have it their way or not? And then not a few analysts, I think, sense that both parties reach the negotiation room feeling triumphant.
Right.
So you see the demands is very, very ambitious, and maybe there's no zone of possible agreement. But we will see how this goes. I think the administration is showing a lot of motivation to get to a deal, which is good if you want to end the war. It may be less conducive if this is intended to convince Iran that it better accept the U.S. demands, because if you're overeager to get a deal, the bazaar makers won't miss the indicators that there's money to be made here.
They can sense it. I think even certain Iranian media outlets and even officials saw the pause of Project Freedom earlier this morning on Wednesday as a sign of Trump blinking first. And yet
we will see.
We'll see. Yeah. Again, our listeners and viewers they'll definitely be smarter than we are because they'll be a day or so ahead of us. And in terms, just a final question, Assaf, about Iran. I mean, do you think that zone of possible agreement is possible? I mean, the Trump maintains consistently it's all about the nuclear issue for him, it seems like.
What we read is that what is currently discussed is a one-pager. Right. Now, I won't tell any state secrets, implying that it's a complex situation. The Iran problem set is a complex one. And if it fits into one page, I think we can trust that it's not a detailed agreement, but maybe a framework of how to move ahead and so on. Just kick the can down the alley. So make sure that you don't get heads on some issues, but you decide to discuss some of them later and so on. So more postpone than actually solve. I think that might be the common ground, because when you sharpen and when you go to details, the level of enrichment, or if there is enrichment, and for how long it will be prevented from Iran, and so on and so forth, these things are getting indeed sharper and more difficult to reach agreements, because the gap is still serious. So I think it's maybe a bit reminiscent of what we see in Gaza, when you have 21 points and you declare a ceasefire. Some players cease, some players fire. Phase 1 is partially implemented, not really. Phase 2 is not really coming. So we are not in the game over part of life, but in the, game is ongoing, but on different dosage of, let's say, fire and diplomacy. Different levels of effort.
Sounds like a classic Middle Eastern solution, which isn't really a solution, but may serve both parties to quote unquote end the war.
Yes, not everything is not every problem is laying itself to solutions. Certainly not immediate ones. So sometimes patience is what you need to saddle here. That's your mount.
Muddling through, and your comment about the one pager reminded me of our mutual friend Amos Harel, who's a regular on this podcast. His famous line, it was in relation to Gaza years ago. He said, the agreement that ended, I think it was a 2012 Gaza war, it was a non-paper that wasn't worth the paper it wasn't written on. So maybe...
yes, in fact, throughout my years, along the Gaza conflicts, 2009, 12, 14, my impression is that it's almost as if we're running around the same stadium, different number of rounds, of laps, but eventually the end point is the same, and you go out through the same rooms, dressing rooms on your way out. The conditions for most of those conflicts were pretty much the same. They touched on the same issues. They were relatively implemented the same level or not implemented, but the important part was to stop the fire and go back to quiet. Those were those years.
Yeah.
How it ended? It ended in October 7th, so the end was pretty bad.
Yes. In retrospect, well, not even in retrospect, there are some people who said it was those campaigns did not go as swimmingly as maybe the political and even military leadership at the time wanted us to believe. But again, Assaf, we didn't have you on to talk Gaza. We may touch on Gaza inadvertently, which we already have. But I really wanted you on to take a deep dive into the Lebanon front, and it's obviously intimately connected with the Iran front, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But the Lebanon front has its own, I think, unique dynamics. And you may recall last time you were on the podcast, way back in December of 2024, it was right after the U.S. Brokered a ceasefire to end that Israel-Hezbollah war. And we should also remind our viewers and listeners that war started on October 8th, 2023, Hezbollah firing into northern Israel in, quote, solidarity with Hamas. That didn't really end up too well for Hezbollah because 15 months later, it's fair to say it took a heavy beating. So bring us up to speed, Assaf, set the table for us. What has happened since that late 2024 ceasefire into 2025, early 2026, until this latest Israel-Hezbollah war that began on March 2nd?
I think the starting point on November 27th, 2024 found, as you said, a greatly weakened and diminished Hezbollah after losing, let's say, 80% of its rockets. But since the numbers were very high to begin with, 20% of a very high number is still several dozen thousands, which is in fact impactful. During those months between the end of November 24 and the beginning of the current war on March 2nd, when Hezbollah decided to attack Israel, it was a special period in which Hezbollah suffered repeated daily attacks by Israel within the ceasefire, because the ceasefire had two parts. One is deciding or agreeing with Lebanon to halt the fighting. Second is agreeing with a side letter, through a side letter with Washington, that if Hezbollah returns, resurges, rebuilds, reconstructs, and so on, and the Lebanese armed forces or the Lebanese state does not prevent it, Israel can operate to remove those threats. And indeed, we saw Hezbollah trying to reconstruct, going south, and so on, and Israel striking almost daily. And I think the figure I saw was that Israel in this period killed 450 Hezbollah members. And during this whole situation, this whole period, Hezbollah hasn't responded. In parallel, the mechanism for implementation of the ceasefire pushed, together with the US leadership, pushed the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah, at least in the south. And the Lebanese armed forces issued a plan to start this. At some point, they began rather effectively, then they pulled back. It was all based on the agreement of Hezbollah. In January, they said that the first phase south of the Litani is mostly accomplished, and they did some reporters, visits and so on. And they said that the next phases will be upper north, north from the Litani, Bekaa, Beirut, and so on. Israel was initially content with the Lebanese armed forces conduct, and then started to voice reservations, showing that the water was muddier than it looked, and that the Lebanese armed forces are not really doing what its government committed. And since this war began, the IDF moved in under, gradually 5 divisions command. It doesn't mean there are 5 divisions there. The forces are much less.
Right.
But the general idea was to make sure that if Hezbollah is embedding its forces and military assets inside homes and villages, these become kosher military targets, and they need to be destroyed in order to prevent Hezbollah from re-entrenching on Israel's borders. So beyond the first line of villages, in which Israel stayed in 5 hilltops since the ceasefire, the IDF moved deeper inside, establishing what is now declared as a security zone with forward defense, buffering between whatever may come from Lebanon and the northern border communities.
Of Israel.
Sorry?
Of Israel, the northern border
Yes,
communities of Israel.
Yes. Now, the findings are very definitive. So there's a lot of weapons found there, a lot of Hezbollah members found there. I saw that the IDF command speaks about 2,000 Hezbollah members already killed since the beginning of this round. But definitely the Lebanese armed forces didn't deliver and probably lied about what it did. And its commander, General Rudolf Haikal, was more or less in cahoot with Hezbollah, making sure that nobody will be embarrassed and weapons that are not supposed to be found will not be found, and so on. The problem or the special challenge in this campaign is that both Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Minister of Defense Israel Katz at the outset of this campaign said this is going to change the reality in Lebanon once and for all.
Mm-hmm.
And as you may have seen, my piece on this from the Washington Institute was once and for all again.
Yeah.
So we don't see the once and for all. We see a serious problem in this setting. It's important to clear up South Lebanon from those weapons. So there is understandably a logic of going out and cleaning it and so on. There is, I think, more difficulty arguing that it needs to be permanent Israeli presence inside Lebanon, because it draws us back to the lessons of the 18 years of the security strip between 82 and 2000 until our withdrawal from there.
So hold that thought, because I want to get into the security zone, looking back and also the current moment. But you did a very good job of kind of bringing us to the current moment. And by the way, just for our listeners and viewers, the Litani that you mentioned is the Litani River, basically the geographic marker between southern Lebanon and the rest of Lebanon. Southern Lebanon right up to the Israeli border, we should say. And the Bekaa is the Bekaa Valley in eastern Lebanon, well-known Hezbollah stronghold. So summing up, basically, Assaf, from the ceasefire in November 2024, right up until March 2nd, 2026, you had a, let's say, how do they call it here in Israel? A luxury ceasefire, where Israel could still take action against Hezbollah all across Lebanon, not just the south. You still had the 5 IDF outposts inside southern Lebanon, kind of guarding the Israel-Lebanon border, but from within Lebanon. But yet, on the other side of the ledger, you had a Lebanese army that wasn't really fulfilling its obligation to disarm Hezbollah, including in southern Lebanon. And you also had the issue of Hezbollah, I guess, reconstituting, reorganizing, potentially rearming. And that, is it fair to say, was a concern for Israel, both the politicians and also the IDF, that brought us, I guess, to another round with Hezbollah in Lebanon?
Yes, I think basically the fact that Hezbollah initiated an attack on Israel made it very evident that the threat is still there. It showed that Hezbollah changed its calculus from containment to action and reaction. It showed that the main war objective in the north, as was defined in September 24, before the offensive campaign began, and that was to safely return the northern communities to their homes. That was unachieved, so yet to be achieved, and that the assurances by the Lebanese government that Hezbollah's arms in the south will be taken care of were proven to be empty, hollow. So I think the IDF jumped in to so-called get the job done or to finish the job, but we need to take into account contextual issues and changes. You don't enter the same river twice, and we're not in the end of 24. Hezbollah has rearranged. It doesn't fight anymore as a terror army, massive and so on, but it moved back to the patterns of guerrilla warfare, which were characteristic until our withdrawal in June 2000. It also introduced on the techno-operational level first-person UAVs.
Yeah.
And some of them are fiber optics guided, so they're not emitting and cannot be jammed.
Right. These are sorry, I'm just going to explain that these are basically drones that drag a fiber optic cable up to the target. And like you said, they're immune from kind of electronic jamming and other measures.
Jamming and detection, because there are also small signature vehicles and so on.
And they're causing massive headache and damage and sometimes deaths to IDF soldiers operating in southern Lebanon.
Until today, we lost in this campaign 17 soldiers, and I think one civilian, and several dozens of injured, including today. Now, the talk in Israel is, of course, that this kind of weapon was already demonstrated in Ukraine, and the IDF should have been ready. It's true, but it is what it is, and you have to deal with this now. As was very predictable, and we wrote about it as well, as soon as you establish a permanent presence in South Lebanon, you become the target of guerrilla warfare, of rocket fire, of those new drones. And of course, if you decide to go, let's say, 10 kilometers north from the blue line, the delineation line between Lebanon and Israel, lo and behold, they're shooting at you from the next ridge and the next ridge and beyond the Litani.
Yeah.
Two additions there is that the ceasefire is now constrained by directives from the White House, because there is an interconnection that the Iranians insisted on, although Israel, was against it, opposed, on connecting between the Iranian ceasefire and Lebanese ceasefire, what they call the connection between the theaters.
Right.
And President Trump more or less told Israel, lie down and don't go beyond the frontier lines. So we got this fighting with one hand tied behind our back, which only today we hear that Israel finally struck in Beirut for the first time since the ceasefire.
Yeah.
So we're fighting in a confined and constrained situation.
That's right. And let me just set up kind of this next stage of the war. Basically, you can divide the Lebanon front into two, I think. Basically, March 2nd to April 16th, which is when Donald Trump imposed ceasefire on Israel and officially Lebanon. And like you said, it came a week after the original ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran. So initially, I've reported on this, I know this for a fact, initially Iran insisted that Lebanon be included in the overall kind of regional ceasefire. Israel objected. Trump took Lebanon out of the overall ceasefire initially. And then Iran, as well as the other various mediators, including Pakistan, insisted again. And Trump re-included Lebanon into the ceasefire. So that's basically the second half of the Lebanon campaign, which is now April 16th until the present day. So you have these two halves.
And you can add a third half, which is a diplomatic channel opened mid-April between the ambassadors of Lebanon and Israel in Washington, D.C., under the auspice of the State Department and the Secretary of State, beginning what is called peace talks. And of course, Lebanon naturally demands a ceasefire, withdrawal, stopping the Israeli attacks, and so on. And while making bold declarations and statements on the illegality of Hezbollah's military assets and so on and activity, they don't seem to have the minerals, so to speak, to go and really disarm them, confront Hezbollah. Israel, on its own, insists on disarmament of Hezbollah as a condition to future, peaceful relations and so on.
Israel Policy Forum is a policy organization rooted in the Jewish community. Our mission is to build support for a secure, Jewish, democratic Israel through a viable resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, advancing pragmatic U.S. policy towards the conflict, U.S.-Israel relations, and regional diplomacy among policymakers and community leaders. We promote policy measures endorsed by credible security experts, develop analysis and commentary, and convene programs that engage and educate leaders across the political, denominational, and generational spectrums. Our Young Professionals initiative, IPF Atid, works to elevate the discourse among next-generation leaders by building community and facilitating engaging programs related to Israeli-Palestinian affairs. To learn more about our work, visit us online at israelpolicyforum.org and follow us on social media. If you rely on Israel Policy Forum for credible and nuanced analysis, please make a tax-deductible gift today at ipf.li/supportthepod or at the Support the Show link in the show notes.
I just wanted to get your kind of net assessment, especially in military terms, okay? What has been achieved over the past 2 months in Lebanon from the Israeli point of view? So you mentioned the 5 so-called IDF divisions that moved in and took, set up this new kind of security zone. 2,000 estimated Hezbollah fighters killed, locating, destroying weapons. They've also been finding major tunnel complexes in southern Lebanon. I mean, in military terms, has this kind of new round, this latest round with Hezbollah, been successful?
If you go narrowly and you say, okay, I want to push away the threat of Hezbollah from our border, well, it's very successful. It's more than 100 Hezbollah members killed to each of our fallen soldiers. You could say we pushed them away from the border and the border communities, but at the same time, we still cannot secure totally. We can secure the communities from the Radwan attack, from the the invasion attack, which is an October 7 model of a threat, and direct fires, which are the most lethal, including anti-tank. But it cannot stop the drones. It cannot stop the rockets.
Right.
Netanyahu said just last week that we have two main problems left: the 122 millimeter rockets, the famous Katyushas for 40 kilometers, and those drones. But more than that, I think we need to zoom out and understand the military strategic aspect here. The doctrine of Hezbollah as part of the Iranian school of indirect warfare, in fact, was based on Israeli acceptance of the rules of the game. You don't attack Iran, but only the proxies. You don't attack first, but only when you're being attacked. If they and when they systematically embed themselves in urban areas and behind population, you're supposed to hold your punches, pull your punches, and not attack them. And as Chairman Mao said, the guerrilla swims in the population like fish in the sea. I think what we see here is Israel's strategic sea change, rejecting the rules of the Iranian game and saying, okay, you want to swim, you'll have no sea. So evacuating 1 million southern Lebanese from their homes, destroying all the structures that were used, and there are many for military purposes, actually raising many Shiite villages, and not just the first line, but second, third, and fourth lines. You can look at
from the border with Israel north into Lebanon.
Yes, lines, yeah. You go northwards, and you see more and more villages ruined. That means that if you plan for guerrilla fighting, you have nowhere to swim. This modus operandi of Hezbollah fighters in civilian clothes, under civilian villages, under towns, inside mosques, in hospitals, in all the gallery of guerrilla that we know from Gaza, they met a different Israel. And you cannot really sustain over time this modus operandi without a population and villages. So I think that's a new phase. We're yet to see how it works. It's not lacking risk. It's not a forever solution, but it's a new situation, because if Hezbollah was embedding itself inside the Shiite communities, most of those Shiite communities are not at home, and many of those homes are no longer there. They're rubble.
Right.
So I think that's a new situation. If we can combine it with a diplomatic side and take this diplomatic channel as something that can establish security arrangements for the longer term, in participation of the Lebanese state, with good monitoring and inspection, that the Lebanese armed forces doesn't do what it really does or usually does, I think we have an opening for something better in the future, including one day peace relations. But that's a long haul.
And barring a kind of major diplomatic breakthrough and a genuine and real security arrangement, especially in southern Lebanon, like you alluded to, will the IDF continue to hold a security zone? I mean, obviously the current Israeli government has, they haven't come out and said it, but they've placed a lot of, let's say, public emphasis on seizing additional territories and buffer zones and security zones, by the way, not just in Lebanon, but also in Gaza and Syria. So let's say on the other side of the ledger, there is a risk that Israel just kind of has recreated the model that didn't quite work that well in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, well, you know that Clausewitz said that war is a continuation of politics by other means, by military means. I think he meant mostly foreign politics. And in our case, as in other nations' case, it's often the domestic politics that dictate the war, the course of war. I find it difficult to see in an election year the current government walk back from its stated commitment to holding Lebanese soil as a way to secure our border communities. I think that militarily there are alternatives to that, but it will take time for those alternatives to emerge through the cracks of maybe the next government, if it's a different one, but also after the real prices and repercussions of this security strip will be accumulating. Plus, when new constraints emerge from the diplomatic and political side. So you need some flexibility there. It's definitely not going to solve the Hezbollah problem. I think one of the IDF seniors recently said this campaign is not going to defeat Hezbollah because this will call for the occupation of whole of Lebanon, and we're not going to do it right now. So more realistic. But if we look at the problem in a systemic way, and we understand it's a combination, the weakness of the Lebanese government, the strength of Hezbollah being an armed group which still enjoys the Iranian support and finance sources, the complicity of the Lebanese armed forces with Hezbollah, the inaptitude of the international effort through the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, right, which will end its mandate the end of the year. And
you're not going to shed a tear for the end of their mandate, as somebody who dealt on this issue very, very closely.
Some analysts warn against a security vacuum that will be created as they leave. But it reminds me of Churchill. So he once said in another, I'll make a paraphrase on what he said, but an empty peacekeeping vehicle will leave Lebanon, and out of it will come UNIFIL. Say hello to Clement Attlee. But anyway, I think we need to approach this systemic problem as a systemic problem, and the approach to it should be similar to the problem structure. We need to isolate Hezbollah from the Iranian sources, like isolate Iran and Lebanon flights and so on. It's already begun. Mm-hmm. We need to cut its financial sources. The IDF needs to go after, kinetically, needs to go after some of its assets. The Lebanese armed forces, or at least part of it, should be carved out under direct authority of the president and address disarmament missions. Don't now fund the whole Lebanese armed forces, but take a dedicated, presidential guard or special units. Secretary Rubio mentioned something like that.
You did.
And go after this as a dedicated effort. The international support should support those units and only those units. And then you can also think of how to isolate Hezbollah's political partners, namely Amal el-Nabi Berri, You need some kind of...
He's the Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament, a veteran Shiite politician in Lebanon.
Yes, and he's actively torpedoing and undermining whatever effort the government makes to disarm Hezbollah and isolate it. So he's a real trouble in the mechanics. Also, we need to look at legislation. We need to provide through the diplomatic channel a strategic alternative to the narrative and ethos of the resistance as the only way to protect Lebanon. And then people say, yes, but how can all these work while the IDF is inside? Well, graduality. We can think of, let's say, parallel missions that the IDF is working somewhere in the south, the Lebanese Armed Forces dedicated units go somewhere in the north or Beirut, and so on for a certain period. After that, when this is over, the IDF can hand over the cleared up place and still keep tabs on this to make sure that Hezbollah doesn't return. You can think of it of a phased and gradual effort. It's nothing that is going to be solved, by one sword stroke and once and for all. This is not going to be once and for all. When I was in service, I used to joke that this is going to be Operation Once and for All 6. So after thinking about all our problems in Lebanon since the 70s, the Litani operation of 78, the first Lebanon war of 82, the many, many years that we spent there, including additional operations, and the second Lebanon war in 2006, and the third in 23, and now we are in the fourth. Yes. No, they began in 23.
Yes.
We began with a very long defensive. So we need to understand that it will take time, but it won't be solved by just looking at the problem and admiring it. We need to apply really a systemic approach that will touch all the parts of this, all components of this problem.
And it also sounds from what you're saying that it won't just be handled and resolved by IDF bombs and tanks and kinetic action, that it does require a certain finesse, diplomacy, politics.
It's a composite problem. It has a political base. It has an economic base. It has a financial base. It has a military aspect. It has a governance problem. There is, many pieces to that. So it's very tempting, like Alexander, to come with a sword and cut the Gordian knot. But then you find that the knot is not made of leather, but of spring steel.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you untangle it in combination of local agency and Israel's insistence and international support, not just complimenting and commending Lebanon for trying, criticizing Israel for doing what it does to self-defend, and never mentioning Hezbollah. So there is like the yellow elephant in the room, like in UN reports. When you don't understand, when you read, I read for many years the Secretary General reports about Lebanon. If you read those reports and then look at the wars we had, you don't understand how it happened, because those weapons were never there and Hezbollah was not really there, and the UN could not verify what Israel is alleging. But, then it's like in The Princess Bride, as I told you before, when there comes a moment when we know who is right and who is dead.
That's right. That's right. I do remember that. Assaf, final two questions for you. The first one is something well that we've spoken about very recently, and that's Hezbollah's remaining lingering capabilities, especially during this, what you said, the fourth Lebanon war. Was Israel surprised? Was the IDF surprised by these capabilities? And kind of by extension, if some of the things that you laid out earlier are put into practice, is there a risk that at a certain point Hezbollah says, okay, we're going to go after Lebanese government figures, institutions, i.e., are they going to actually train their guns inside Lebanon? So two related questions, but maybe two separate questions.
I'll start with the second. Hezbollah is already actively threatening the Lebanese government. And the most impressive threat is not only going after the leaders and assassinating them, but the great specter of the civil war. So whenever you say civil war in Lebanon, it's supposed to petrify all the rest and stop them from even thinking about doing something harmful to Hezbollah. Will they go there? Do they want to go there? Okay, militarily, when maybe they can, but can they survive it politically? They took a lot of damage by their repeated action to drag Lebanon into war with Israel. It didn't go well with most of the Lebanese public. So they can easily go there and do it and then face the consequences. I don't think that Israel is very active in Lebanese politics or in maneuvering the Lebanese politics. I think Israel lost most of the appetite to even think about it seriously in the early 80s.
Right, didn't go very well.
We were taken to the cleaners by the Maronites, and it ended badly for us. So I think in general, there's no appetite in the Israeli establishment for meddling in Lebanese politics. Although I've seen some indicators that in the just after the ceasefire with Iran, I think on April 18th, there was a massive aerial strike in Lebanon using the free air power that wasn't busy now in Iran. And among those were some signaling attacks or strikes in Enetin near Nabi Berry's home. This was a clear warning signal.
I see.
And I hear that he heard it, like he got the signal. So on this, I'm putting it for over the side for a minute. On surprises, well, I think we need to differentiate between things we don't know and things we know and still we are not getting ready. It seems that what we hear is that the Hezbollah of this round is much more active and risk-taking and bold than the Hezbollah of the fall of 24.
Right.
So they seem to be more active. Tactically, they're using means, some of them very expected, predictable. Some of them are expected and still surprising. It's a bit like Hormuz. Hormuz was in the cards for, yes, the Strait of Hormuz closure was in the cards for 40 years. And still somehow the US seems to have been surprised by this happening at this timing.
They were.
I'm just judging by readiness for counter options. So again, what we read from Israel is that some of those threats, like the first-person UAVs, drones, were known and were watched in Ukraine, and they were very predictable. And still the readiness level is not good enough, and we're losing equipment and people to this kind of attacks. So, you should be always ready. Many times you're ready for the last round instead of this round. Mm-hmm. It's a learning competition, and he who learns faster will prevail. Although, let's be candid, Hezbollah can't defeat Israel. Israel will find it difficult or very costly to defeat Hezbollah all the way. So what we should be seeking, I think, is some kind of how to optimize the mixture of direct Israeli approach against Hezbollah, some responsibility by the Lebanese armed forces, and directed by their government, supported by international players like US CENTCOM, or if there are other willing nations to support this, with financial warfare against their sources, isolating them from Iran, dealing with their political partners. Eventually, I think we're all looking for the Lebanese election to see how Amal and Hezbollah decline in their influence over the Shiite sect, because eventually Hezbollah is much about how to respond or how to satisfy the needs of the Shiites by a non-Iranian, non-radical, non-jihadist way. So it's basically a social, political issue, which is not for Israel to resolve, but maybe to support a little.
Okay. I like that. It's a more optimistic note to end things.
I didn't say it will work, but what I'm saying is that one military hand clapping will not do the job.
Yeah, look, we're not going to come back in 1, 5, or 10 years and say, well, you said that this will definitely work, but at least it's a plan. And at least it kind of takes into account, like you said, this very complex, multifaceted problem set, and not just, airstrikes.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's hope. Assaf, thank you so much for breaking it all down with us. And we should also say, what happens between Donald Trump and Iran in terms of the negotiations or not, potential escalation, could also have a major impact on Israel v. Hezbollah in Lebanon.
This cannot be disconnected from the regional context. And I think that, inshallah, those things will fall into places. But as usual in the Middle East, a lot of things can go wrong and still will.
and they definitely will.
Yeah.
Thanks, Assaf, and send my best to everyone in Washington.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, thanks again to Assaf Orion for his generous time and insights. Also, special thanks to our producer, Jacob Gilman, our editor, Tracy Levy, and our assistant producer, Eden Jesselson, as always, and to all of you who support Israel Policy Forum's work. Do consider making a donation to Israel Policy Forum so it can keep being a credible source of analysis and ideas on issues such as these that we all care deeply about, including this podcast. And most importantly, thank you for listening, and please subscribe and spread the word.